Hi everyone, welcome back to my Lunar Wheel project. Grab a cozy drink and we'll chat about art, the seasons, the moon, and what I'm creating on the front and back of this wheel. First off, I'll begin sketching out my art story of February. It was definitely a month of transition, from snowy days to the first flowers of spring bursting open. To tell the story of these seasonal changes through art, I want to consider which elements to include from my vlog, what colors represent it, and where to best place these nature drawings on this odd little pie slice of space I have to work with. To capture this transition, I'm literally stacking the changes up, from the sleeping moss at the bottom to the dried rose hip covered in snow in the center to the newly blooming crocus at the top. Moving to watercolors, I'm blocking in the background of the pale brown wood, then I'll build the details of the lime green moss on top. I'm not worried about the dark pencil marks, even though the paint is fairly light. I'm not erasing them. Instead, I'm using them to add a little shadows and depth underneath that first layer. Working again from my Esse Watercolor palette, I've chosen a brownish burgundy for the dried rose hip. I'm filling the whole rose up, even running it out over the thorns and tips, because I'll be layering on more paint, more colored pencil, and more ink pen as I go along. To create the effect of snow, I'm using a watered down indigo shade, and I'm painting the shadows at the edge of the snow, and then letting the white of the page stand out as the highlights. I'm painting this basically the same way I would a cloud, by letting its shadows define it. Moving up the panel, I really should have started with the whole background first, working as you do in watercolor from light to dark. But I couldn't wait, so I started on the dark green on the leaves. It's not a big deal. I'll just wait until the leaves dry, then paint into the spaces between. Moving to the crocus petals, I'm painting the purple shadows first and letting the white of the page shine through. I've also switched to a number 1 round brush from my favorite number 6 cat's tongue brush. I'll link all of my brushes, paints, and any other supplies below. Using a much thicker mixture of the same purple paint I used on the shadows, I'm tracing the delicate veins up the petals. I'm making sure I start out with the darkest concentration of color at the base, then I'm tapering it out until it's just a whisper of color, just a shade darker than the shadows inside the curls of the petals. I'm coming back in to finish the background, filling it here with a watery wash of gray-green and dabbing away the wet paint where it's gotten too dark. The reason I should have started with my background first is that I would have kept a consistent color and texture all the way across. Filling in the little gaps between the leaves, I run the risk of making some parts too dark, so I'll just have to take extra care that everything stays nice and light. So I started working on the stamen. Up until now, I've left this blank so that the yellow wouldn't mix with the other colors and get muddy. On top of the yellow, I'm going to layer on a little depth with a middle orange on the stem and then a deeper reddish orange where it disappears down behind the petals of the flower. After letting everything dry, I'm adding colored pencil shading to give a little texture and darkening the shadows on the rose hips with a rich burgundy. Then I'll bring a lime green brightness to the tips of the feathery moss tendrils. Now for one of my favorite parts, getting out my pen and pulling it all together by outlining some hard edges and crisp details. Even something as delicate as white petals can be outlined without losing their airiness. I let the edges trail off into fine dots, and I leave gaps in the lines on the inside of the flower where the petals are touching, while outlining fully the outer edge to make it stand out from its background. I'm filling in the background here with a pale wash of spiky crocus leaves, but I'm not lining them in ink. Instead, I'm letting them just fade into the background. Now to finishing up the February panel and tidying up the front. February is done and looks very nice for panel number 2, but this is only half the wheel, because on the other side I'm recording my thoughts and making connections from the seasons to the cycles of the moon so that I can really use this as a creative tool for later on. I've outlined 12 triangles and I've left space for nature notes about what it felt like that month, a list of moon names tied right to where I am in the mountains and what is happening around me at the time. My goal is to be able to use this wheel to help me journal, become more connected to seasonal changes happening around me, and just develop a more personal connection to the moon, right here, right where I am. If I was living at the beach, my illustrations, the nature notes, and moon names would be entirely different. Same if I was living in the desert. I'm starting the whole thing in pencil, and I'll ink over it when I'm done. That way I can add words or change placement if I need to. Around the top of the wheel, I have drawn little stones to paint with the colors of that month. I tried to swatch out several styles, squares, circles, lines, but all of them felt wrong. I like the idea that I have collected these stones to go with nature notes. I try to pull the color to one side, clean my brush, then let it seep over in the water to the other side. Though I'm using the Esse color palette, I'm renaming the colors on my wheel to correspond with the colors I'm seeing in the environment at that time. The colors of January were very limited, the blue of a cold sky, the dark brown of bare branches. But in February, things are coming back to life. There's more color in the landscape. I chose a bright green for the sleeping moss, a reddish brown for the dried rose hips, a soft blue for the snowy shadows, and a soft purple for the first flowers of the season. I'm excited to see how these colors are going to change around the wheel as I go through the year. I've named the stone colors what I was seeing in the landscape, and now I'm moving on to trace my writing. I'll erase all the pencil marks when I'm done. It's important to me to use my own handwriting and keep all its wonky angles and imperfections in there, I don't want it to look like a font. When I pick this up and look at it later on, I want to feel like it's a note from myself, like I'm having a conversation with myself from the year before. So I'm showing my process of recording, faults and all. When I'm finished, I'll erase all the pencil lines from underneath the ink. It's so satisfying. So I'm happy with my February notes. I'll go back and ink the whole outline later when I decide what I want to paint in the middle. But already I'm seeing how this wheel is going to help me keep track of nature's changes and make me slow down and really take note of what's happening around me during each lunar cycle. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.